friends, welcome to another episode of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here in full off-season mode, but finally we're getting to the time where we can start previewing these major regions. As you know, there's still not much information that the LPL or LCK like to release about their schedules. The LCS, weeks ago, they were like, here's our schedule, here are the teams lined up. Don't get that in the Western regions, or the Eastern regions yet.
Yeah, they're the ones, waiting for the last minute to submit their homework here. NA and EU, we've got it. We're ready to go. We're getting prepared for it already. But LPL, LCK, we're just waiting a little bit to see their schedules some more. Doesn't mean we can't break into their rosters and talk about what we expect to see.
Yeah, you don't want to give the teams too much time to prep for their week one matchups. You want to keep it a little bit spicy with however the meta is shaping up at that point. But today we're doing power rankings for the LPL. We're going to go through the Eastern and Western Conference. The draw was last week for what those groups are. We're going to go 1 to 7 in each group and break down the power rankings, how we think they'll finish in the regular season. I've got to be adamant here that these rankings were going to be how we think the regular season will shape up. Playoffs could be a totally different animal. So one more time, just regular season for these standings, which we're going to go through. And later on, we'll have some spicy bold predictions. Last bold prediction, Mark said Fnatic would beat Kingzone at MSI. Look what happened.
Hey,
he's a genius.
Yeah, let's any of the other bold predictions didn't happen. We never made them, so it didn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Just Fnatic beating Kingzone. We got that one right.
That was the only one we had.
1 for 1. We're good.
Yeah, we didn't say anything else. Let's dive into these power rankings, starting off in the Western Conference. Coming in at number 7, it's OMG, or oh my god, as you might say. A couple years ago, this was a top-tier Chinese team. You saw them at Worlds a lot. Even in the last year or two, they were almost in a third-place match. But the last year, they've been bad.
Yeah, it's definitely been a really rough year for OMG. This is a team that when you look at them on paper and what's going on for this organization, you might feel good. You might think things are going up, things are positive for them. They've got an unbelievable home facility back in China to practice in. Everyone thinks it's awesome, and then you look at them and it's like, wow, your performance does not match up to what it needs to be.
Yeah, basically you've got Icon in that mid lane, who is a pretty solid mid laner in the LPL and really got quite a bit of talent, but outside of that, there's not much working for this roster. They finished 5 and 14, 6th place last year in spring, or last split in spring, and looks like I think they might drop down to that 7th spot and even have a worse performance than last year, just because some of these surprise teams that finish in the mid-tier rankings in spring split are going to show up again, I think, and OMG going to continue struggling.
Yeah, definitely. Haven't seen enough from OMG in their roster to say that they're going to make any type of notable improvements heading into this summer split, so it looks like another wasted year for OMG.
Coming in number 6, Marin isn't enough for Top Sports to make some real noise. Maybe he steals a couple games from them or for them, and that finishes them above OMG in those standings. But again, Top Sports, before Marin came in, they looked absolutely horrible in the spring. Then they got a couple wins with them in the lineup, and then towards the end of the split, they again were not looking that great. So again, definitely going to be a bottom tier team in that Western Conference. And overall, a lot of these Group A, Group B, East, West, whatever you want to call it, it's pretty similar from the spring split, even though they had an entirely new team. Top Sports going to continue to struggle.
Yeah, Top Sports looking to be better this split. I don't think they're going to find, when you're looking at who's going to be the guy carrying them again, you'd have to say that Marin is the name that pops out of who you expect to be someone to be, someone that they can rely upon. And you saw that for a couple games with Marin last split when he came in right away, immediately did have an impact for this roster. But as you saw later on into it, it just wasn't working. They weren't finding enough things right for them. And they did finish with a very poor record in the spring split. And I expect them again to have a record in the summer split of one that they wouldn't be exactly proud of.
I'm expecting improvement, though. They're going up from 7 to 6. That's what we're saying heading into 2018 spring. So, maybe some positives take off. I don't think Marin is going to be there after this split, but we'll see. Maybe he gets back to his old form. Let's move on to number 5. One of the best names, not in just the LPL, but across all the leagues, FunPlus Phoenix. That sounds like a meme. That sounds more memey than the Unicorns of Love, but they actually surprised and had some decent games. Don't see them making the playoffs again here in 2018 summer, but they're a mid-tier team that can maybe steal a game off of one of the top teams in the East or maybe West, but not a playoff contender.
No, I know I wouldn't expect this team to be into the playoffs whatsoever, but when you're talking about FunPlus Phoenix, it's definitely a team that you can see right into that middle of the pack here. That has shown in the past that they've been able to pick up wins against even some of the better teams in the LPL, but just haven't been able to find that consistency that you want and that you can rely upon and say that this is a team that should be pushing for the playoffs.
Yeah, and they got Cool in the lineup for 2018 summer, of course. You remember from OMG. He's fallen off quite a bit since his days out there where OMG was a top contender. Maybe some of these guys surprise on Phoenix, and actually, is Phoenix? I don't even know if that's the proper way to say this. FunPlus Phoenix, either way, it's a fantastic way to say them. But I don't think they're fighting for that playoff spot. Coming in, number 4 on our power rankings on the Western squad. I got to look at number 4 because I don't remember. Snake! It's Snake Esports! Of course, a team that, you know, when they initially came onto the scene, they were surprised everyone on the LPL. And last split, there weren't many expectations, and they actually performed super well. S of M was fantastic in the jungle. Flandre, as always, was really solid for them. Really, the liability for them was Crystal in that bottom lane. And if there's an AD carry-centric meta, that's going to be an issue for them.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that recently with the strength of the AD carry position. And then especially when you want to talk about LPL AD carries, well, you've got a pretty darn good one in Uzi there on the other side in the other conference. So you definitely are going to be running up against some tough bot lanes, and that's where I see Snake Gaming having some struggles. You know, of course, you forgot about them. They're the sneaky snakes, and then you can never find them in the grass, and you can never find them in the playoffs either, almost. I don't think that this is going to be a team that eventually pushes again. I mean, I know that they were there pretty much in the spring split, but I don't see them getting much more ahead again into this split. But because they had that strength in your top jungle positions, but I find that you're going to be, again, weak in that mid to bot lane, and that's where teams are going to take advantage of you.
Yeah, they did finish second in the spring split. Didn't quite put up the performance you saw in the regular season during their playoff run. Got them sliding a bit to 4th, but 4th, again, is still good enough for playoffs. But you lose that first game as the insane rules that the LPL have. Let's go to number 3, where it was a team that underperformed in spring split. We're talking about World Elite. I think they, again, this is a playoff team. They were missing a lot of the roster in spring. They didn't have Condi, and they didn't have Ben for the majority of it. They're also signing every single player on the planet to their roster.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of a little disappointed to almost not see my name there as one of the additional signees.
You just missed the cut.
My tryout, I was so close. Anyways, though, I still think World Elite, a top-level team in the LPL, and I actually think that they have a chance to be even better than the number 3 spot that they are in right here. This really does seem to be a conference that they can take advantage of if they can get back to the levels that we expect from a lot of them. When you were talking about how you saw them in their performance in the spring split, it really was only Xie in the mid lane performing extremely well. 957 wasn't bad in that top lane, but you weren't getting enough from everybody else on the WE roster to really prove that you're a powerhouse.
GA was 1v9ing a lot of those matchups. Coming in at number 2, it is the team that took the top spot in the West in spring, talking about EDG, who lost in the finals to RNG. Got them slipping to 2nd. They did look really solid in the regular season, and a lot of that was, well, all of that was without Clear Love, iBoy, Scout, Mako. Pretty much everyone on that roster was very solid. And Ray, in his debut split with them, actually looked pretty decent.
Yeah, Ray has definitely been a nice surprise since he's been coming over from his Cloud9 days. He's definitely looked good on the champions that he has been playing for them on EDG, and I've liked what I've seen from this roster. It's been a great rebound here. This is one of those teams that is so popular in China and even internationally that people like to see EDG do well, and I think this will be another split where they put together a good run here and get some good points heading towards Worlds.
Yeah, and obviously getting to the finals helped them rack up a lot of championship points. But we don't have them finishing 1st in the regular season like they did in spring, because we've got these upstart boys from Rogue Warriors who definitely defied all expectations in spring. And Doinb is a guy you just can't help but cheer for because he's so animated on stage. And really, he performed super well for them. And of course, SMLZ. was an absolute animal, especially in the playoffs. He was completely dumpstering Jackie Love in that bottom lane. So that dual carry threat for Rogue Warriors, I think it's going to carry them to the top spot in the regular season.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. When you're looking at SMLZ, this is the AD carry that everyone is so excited about now watching him play. You're talking about all these things of him popping off in the playoffs, and he did do that. But it's important to remember that he did have a stretch there in the playoffs where he was struggling, didn't put up the performances that you would want to see from him. But I think that when you're talking about who is there to watch in the LPL and who you want to be knowing heading towards future international events, SMLZ is definitely a star in the making. Got to keep track of him.
And look for Rogue Warriors to prove that it wasn't a fluke that they had such a stellar performance in the spring split. Coming up after the break, time to take a look at the Eastern Conference power rankings, and that's the squads that everyone thinks are a little bit stronger than their Western counterparts. We're back on League Unlock. Eric and Mark here, looking ahead to the 2018 LPL Summer Split, doing some power rankings heading into that regular season. These rankings, number 7 to 1 for each conference. Already did the Western squads. Moving on to the East, just for the regular season. We're not looking at playoffs yet because playoffs are a long ways away. This is how we think the standings might shape up after the regular season. Let's go. Number 7, out of the Eastern Conference, it's Vici Gaming. Remember Easy Hoon on SKT when he was the best Azir in the world? Well, now he's struggling on this Vici Gaming squad because turns out when you don't have the talent and organization that SKT is, it's a lot harder to do well, believe it or not.
Yeah, definitely harder to reach those same type of highs that you were getting with SKT and rocking that Azir in the mid lane and everything else. But Vici Gaming definitely does not have the roster to put it together and pick up the wins that they will need to have to make it to the playoffs. Sorry to say this, Vici, I just don't think you have it. I love you, Easy Hoon. I loved your time on SKT, and I love using your World Championship skin. But I don't think your job on Vici Gaming is going to be easy enough this split to make it to the playoffs.
Yeah, they had a 2-17 record in 2018 spring. I think they could improve on that. Maybe 3, maybe 4 wins. But yeah, I don't see them making a huge amount of noise in the playoffs. Let's roll on to number 6, where you've got a impless LDG, which kind of sounds like limping, imping. They struggled with Imp. Obviously, he's a shell of his former self on that LGD squad, but I suspect more struggles for them finishing near the bottom again in the standings, which is too bad for a guy like PYL who has been there through it all for this LGD team.
Yeah, it doesn't look like LGD is doing enough really to make up for the loss of Imp and what's going to be going on for them here. And it's kind of sad because LGD is definitely one of those organizations that you'd like to see do well and from a historical perspective, but when you're seeing what they're going to be doing here and how they did last split, you definitely don't have the confidence to make that type of pick that they'll be at the end of the regular season making it into playoffs.
Yeah, and really outside of one LPL win and a berth at Worlds in 2015, wasn't much done for LGD with Imp on that lineup. So we'll see. Maybe there's a change coming for them, but it's going to take longer than one split to turn it all around there. We're going into the top 5. We got Suning Gaming, which is part of a couple of teams that kind of sat in the middle of the pack in 2018 spring. Maybe performed a little better than you were expecting. There were a lot of teams hovering around that 9-10, 10-9, just around that 500 mark in 2018 spring. And I could see Suning doing that again, kind of maybe almost knocking on the playoff door, not quite getting there.
Yeah, definitely. This is a team that when you come into here and to now be in this Eastern Conference and the type of teams that you're going to be going up against, again, 2 times a split now, given that you are in your own conference and you'll have to play against the other teams in your conference twice, it's going to be a tough ask for them to find more wins against the top teams here in the East because it is such a high stacked conference here. I don't see them finding ways to pick up enough wins to get above that 500 win record and make it to the playoffs.
Yeah, 4 games against a combined RNG and Invictus. It's going to be tough
That's
for
a rough one.
Any of the middle tier teams going forward in the summer split. Let's go on to number 4, which is another team who kind of sat around the middle of the block in spring. Talking about JD Gaming, which finished pretty much 1 game ahead, not pretty much, exactly 1 game ahead of Suning at 10-9, above that 500 mark. Maybe they can squeak into the playoffs. Well, we have them squeaking in that 4th spot, but again, I don't know how they don't see them making much noise in the actual playoffs.
Yeah, Vici Gaming as well, another organization that comes in here and hopes to have a better result here in this summer split, that they felt like they did enough in the spring split to show potential and try to push it together here in the summer split. And I think that, well, given that you're in the Eastern Conference and against some of the giants that you're going to have to go up against a lot more often than, say, the teams like WE in the Western Conference, I think that this is definitely one of those type of daggers here to this team, to JD Gaming, that you're going to have to be against these top-level teams.
And I know people are hyping up this conference as being more difficult than the West, but really, it's pretty top-heavy. You've got IG and RNG, which is like, okay, that's probably indisputably the top 2 teams coming into the split. Outside of that, I feel like those other 2 playoff spots are relatively wide open. So someone like JD Gaming could slide into that 3 or 4 spot and, you know, maybe go on a run. Probably not, but there's a chance.
Yeah, there's definitely that room here in these conferences where you expect to come away with losses against these top teams like RNG and IG, but then when you're looking towards the bottom level of this conference, you have to be picking up your wins against them, even if you are that mid-level team, and hoping to pick off one win here against RNG and something like that to push yourself towards playoffs. So you really need to take care of business against these lower-level teams.
Yeah, you gotta win the games that you're supposed to win, and, you know, maybe compete against some of the top teams. Let's go to the top 3 now. You got Billy Gaming coming in that 3rd spot. Another team that surprised last split and performed a lot better than I think a lot of people were expecting them coming into it. Amazing Jay was fantastic in that top lane for them, and I mean, he was really the star of that lineup for them, as well as in the bottom lane. You had Road performing pretty well, but I mean, they finished 3rd last split. And we got them finishing 3rd again, even though maybe it's a tougher conference. It actually might not be for them. Again, if you don't include RNG and Invictus, it might be easier.
Yeah, I think that one of the nice things here, if you're Billy Gaming heading into this conference, is that you know that you're going to be at least competitive. You have that advantage to you right out of the gates compared to everyone else here in this conference that might be looking at, oh, you know what, we're really going to be struggling against some of these top teams. Billy Gaming, you've shown enough. You had that strength again in the spring split, and those results in the spring split, importantly enough, against those top-level teams, that you should feel confident heading in towards this summer split. And again, you're a guy in that top lane, Amazing Jay. He is going to be the one to watch for this team. He is the guy that puts together all the great plays.
Yeah, and they also seem to put Mole in a little bit more towards the end of the split. That seemed to be working a lot better for them in the playoffs. It's time for the top 2. The big boys, Oof. You know who they are, but the question is, what is the order? This is something that might irk some people, because RNG just won the spring split. They won MSI.
So they're number 1, right?
Coming in number 2.
What?
In the regular season.
Crazy.
Listen, you know, a lot of the times Uzi takes a break during the regular season. He did it during spring, and RNG looked like a totally different team without him there. They got to be riding high after 2 big tournament victories. I just think they might flatline a bit during the regular season and kind of start coasting a bit, as some of the top-tier teams do. They're going to drop maybe more games than you'd expect. Don't forget, they finished 3rd in spring and then destroyed the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the important thing to bring up here is what you were talking about with Uzi. Uzi is, of course, the MVP, the engine that drives this whole train. But the important thing here is that, yes, Uzi did take some time off in the spring split, and RNG looked like a totally different team without Uzi in the roster, that absolute stud, that carry in that bot lane. They need him there if they want to be this top-level team. And I think putting them at 2nd here in the regular season, important to remember, regular season is a pretty safe spot to put them in here into this conference, and one that I would expect them to try to be, again, you know, challenging for that top spot. But if we do see this Uzi type of break happen or anything like that, I think slotting them there at number 2 is a very reasonable spot.
Regular season. Come playoffs, fully expect them to make a serious run, maybe get another title. But if they're number 2, that means number 1 is going to Invictus Gaming, who finished 18-1 in the regular season and fell apart in the playoffs. Couldn't even secure that 3rd place. So you know, whereas RNG might kind of be coasting, you know, they already got their wins. IG didn't. They didn't win squat, so you know they're still fired up. And there's not much information on the Shy, but I got to expect he's going to be playing most of the games.
From everything that I've seen on Twitter and online, and again, none of this is completely confirmed. Again, it's hard to get perfect English information straight from the LPL, is that the Shy is back and is ready to play. He's healed and he's with the coaching staff, everything there. But for their plans for the Demacia Cup heading up pretty soon and heading into the split is that they're going to roll with Duke in the top lane playing, which is questionable to me given what we've seen from Duke recently, and his performances are very different than SKT Duke. And given what you're going to be going up against with RNG and the rest of this LPL, I really hope that you have the Shy there in that top lane. And I hope, again, that he's the Shy that we've been all hyped up and we're hoping to see at MSI.
If he is in those playoff series for IG, there's probably a very different outcome. But we're hoping that he's going to be playing the majority of the regular season. That's the Eastern Conference. Coming up after the break, time for some bold predictions heading into 2018 summer. And summer spicy. Spoilers.